I'm joined on today's episode of the Halliday Wine Companion Podcast by Giles Cooke from Thistledown Wines. We're going to talk about winning Wine of the Year, the Grenache glow-up, becoming a Master of Wine, and much more. Welcome, Giles, and congratulations on winning Wine of the Year.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. So you've said in the past that when it comes to making wine, you're usually racked with doubt throughout the entire process until, someone like James Halliday comes along and says, that's bloody good. That wasn't the case this time, was it?
I know what you're referring to. Yes, it kind of still was. So I did make a video the day before the fruit was picked for the wine that went on to win, where I thought it was probably the best fruit that we've ever worked with, and it would make the best charming man we've ever made. But what I think, and what critics think at any point in time, are not necessarily the same thing. Thankfully, This time around, they were kind of
justified.
In line with one another. So we were working with brilliant fruit from the outset.
Yeah.
But the style of wines we make is so kind of transparent and so reflective of that site in that season. It is always very subjective as to how somebody's going to react to it. Yeah. We don't make the same style every single year. Mm-hmm. It's very reflective of where it comes from. So there is always that doubt that maybe you've pushed things too far, maybe you've picked too early or too late or whatever. So I'm still always racked with doubt.
What was your reaction then when you found out that it had won Wine of the Year?
I guess surprise, first off, that little old Thistledown could win such a major award. Pride, I think, that we're representing an incredible vineyard with an amazing history, which really has only come to sort of the forefront and been valued probably in the last 10 years. So having been part of that process is really important. And relief, I think, in that although I founded Thistledown back in 2010, for most of its life, it's been part of a larger organisation, a UK-owned business.
Yeah.
But as of end of January this year, I bought out their interest. So this was the first year where I was fully in charge and fully responsible for paying all the bills.
Yeah.
And I thought it might be sod's law that this would be the first year where we didn't get loads of good scores and plaudits. So I didn't need to worry as it happened.
No, not at all. So I'll ask you about the wine in a second, but before we talk about that, can you tell me a bit about the Smart Vineyard and Bernard Smart and, where it is and what, I guess, Bernard meant to the McLaren Vale, especially viticultural community?
Yeah, so I think Bernard and the Smart family, they really kind of reflect the history of McLaren Vale Grenache, the roller coaster ride that it's had. So over the generations, they've planted a lot of the very best vineyards that still exist in the Vale now. And they were particularly determined and dogged to keep those vineyards in place when economics and just rational thinking would probably make you think that you should take them out. So everybody's very grateful that they kept those vineyards going. They planted vineyards that Yangara now utilise for high sands. They were involved in the planting of Sue Trott's vineyard, where we make Sands of Time.
Yeah.
And then the Clarendon vineyard, which is one of the highest vineyards in McLaren Vale, still really only exists as a result of serendipity, because back in the vine pool scheme, they actually applied to remove the vineyard, but because Bernard's son Wayne was working for the government at the time, he wasn't allowed to apply for the grant to take out the vineyard. So only by dint of that does the vineyard still actually exist. But it's a remarkable vineyard. Parts of it are over 100 years old.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different soil profile to Blewett Springs area that we work in comprehensively, although it's only like 10 minutes away by car. Very, very different soil profile. And as a result, the wines are completely different from what you see in Blewett Springs. So it gives us a beautiful contrast between those two areas.
Yeah.
It's a vineyard which really, and in the last 10, 15 years, has been valued. Bernard, in particular, went through decades when nobody was interested in buying the fruit. And he would get families from Sydney and Melbourne to come and pick the fruit, and they would either sell it as grapes in boxes or make it into wine.
Yeah.
And it was all manual labour at that point in time. So, I mean, thinking back, an incredible labour of love to have kept that vineyard in the ground. And we're just really pleased that during Bernard's lifetime, he was able to see that it had gone from being completely dismissed and unloved to revered.
Let's open the wine. Let's get into
it. Shall I open it?
Yeah, please. Yeah. So when did you first meet Bernard and make this beautiful wine?
So I think probably met Bernard the first time 2014, 2015.
Yeah.
And it took a couple of years to persuade him that we should sell him a fruit. He was, although it wasn't as valued a vineyard as it is now, he had a lot of loyal buyers, some of which were actually making it into rosé. So he wasn't necessarily going to be persuaded by some random pom coming over and asking to buy the fruit. So I think it took a couple of sit-downs with him,
a few cups of tea,
over a cup of tea, to persuade him that I was serious. I was coming back each year and asking the same questions. So the first vintage we actually made was 2016. Mm-hmm. So we made a couple of wines under what we call an advanced release program. It's kind of inspired by Ridge Winery in California that do these kind of experimental bottlings. And so we made 2 vintages of that. And after those 2 vintages, I was pretty much convinced that it was worthy of going into our single vineyard range of wines. And all of our wines have names inspired by either the grower's history, my past, musical tastes, these sorts of things.
Well, this one's both, isn't it?
It is, yes. The 2018 was the first vintage of what we actually labelled This Charming Man.
Yeah. And how do you make the wine?
It's a cliche to say the vineyard makes the wine, but it does. Of all the vineyards that we work with, this probably has the strongest, yet the most kind of delicate imprint on the style of wine that we can make from it. We work with a huge variety of old vine vineyards right across the Vale. But this one, whenever you taste it, immediately after it's gone through fermentation, it's so smart. It's very transparent, always relatively kind of pale in colour. But has this incredible kind of tension between firm, grippy tannins and all these sort of very high-toned aromatics, lots of sort of North African spice and rose petals and dried citrus and all of these kinds of flavours. So all I'm trying to do, and this goes pretty much for everything that we do at Thistledown, is as faithfully as possible translate that site into bottle. Yeah. And gradually over a period of time, that has meant doing less and less in the winery. So obviously the fruit is hand-picked. It has to be because of the old vines. I pick on the early side. So we have a phrase, we pick on the way up, not the way down. So traditionally, I think a lot of people would want to see fruit physiologically ripe. And then there's always a period of time when you're then organising logistics. And so you may well have missed the best point in the grapes kind of development, just in that delay between when you've decided it's ripe and when you can actually pick it. So I'm always looking to anticipate ripeness. So we're picking on the way up. Yeah. And generally, while you always kind of are disappointed by picking too late. It's rarely the case that you're disappointed by picking too early. So it's about picking the right variety from the right place at the right time. Everything is wild fermented. And then the 2024 was fermented in a concrete pyramid.
Is that different to previous years, or?
No, we did the 23 in that as well. We've had more capacity in these concrete fermenters over the last few years, so we're gradually pushing all of the most serious wines into those fermenters. And it's done in a layer cake ferment, so we do a layer of whole bunch, then crushed, then whole bunch, and then nothing.
What does the layer cake do to the wine?
But the whole bunch for me does two things. One's kind of flavour profile, which is it lends a sort of a sappiness, a greenness, and restrains the overt generosity of Grenache. Generally in South Australia, we're not trying to exaggerate ripeness, we're trying to restrain it and give it form and structure. So the stems do some of that. They provide more kind of green, grippy tannin. But also when you're not actually moving the ferment very much, so we're not doing pump overs, if you don't have the room and the space created by all of those stalks, then you would get hot and cold spots in the fermentation. Okay. So it provides pathways for juice to move up and down through the ferment. Cool. So one's kind of mechanical, one's more sort of taste profile.
Yep.
And then we don't do anything to it. So it's essentially an infusion rather than an extraction.
Let's taste. You taught me through the wine. What are we tasting?
So immediately, I think, even though this is a young wine, you get that very expressive nose. It's highly aromatic. There's loads of North African spices. It's that sort of rose petal, ras el hanout kind of spice fragrance. There's a little bit of dried citrus. There's a slight earthiness in there as well, but it's pretty. It's forward. Mm-hmm. Then on the palate, this wine is always deceiving because it always looks relatively pale, and you think, oh, it's very pretty. It's
very light.
It's light. It's just going to be a quaffer.
I mean, it's very easy to drink.
Too easy to drink, always. But that is one of the great joys of Grenache. But there is a firm tannin profile. And when a lot of us first started making this more contemporary style of Grenache, there was a lot of people suggesting that it was more like Pinot Noir than old school Grenache. Now people are talking about Nebbiolo sometimes, that combination of firm tannins, got a more savoury fruit profile and relatively sort of pale colour. I don't see that very often, certainly not from the wines in Blewett Springs. But in this wine, I do see a little bit more of that. It's that high-toned fruit, the dried citrus, the rose petals, then that firm kind of more ferrous tannin. It's just a beautifully kind of balanced, poised wine that even from the off drinks really well and is set up to age beautifully over a long period of time as well.
But it wasn't the only wine that came from this vineyard this year, was it?
No, it wasn't. 24 was actually a little bit more generous than recent vintages. I think as a result of quite a wet December in late 23. And Grenache, I think, saw that as a sort of signal to fill your boots. We're gonna have a big vintage, and throughout the Vale there was quite generous yields, slightly over generous in places, I think, and so we were actually able to access a slightly different block within the Smart Vineyard for the 24 vintage as well, and I had every sort of intention of that would go into this charming man as well. The fruit looked brilliant, made exactly the same way. And then when it came to the process of putting the wine together, because I go through every single barrel and just work out which ones we can include, all of the barrels from the second pick that we did whether I put one in or two in or whatever, whenever I put those wines in front of people and said, okay, which one is this charming man? They all said the one that didn't have any of the second pick in it, which in hindsight, I very much wish we had been able to include all of them in this wine, but we didn't. And I mean, good winemaking is as much about what you leave out as what you put in. And so I decided, okay, I'll just keep it aside. I'll bottle less of this charming man so that we keep the quality as high as possible. And then I started looking at that second batch, and actually on its own is a beautiful wine. And it's gone on to get 97 points from Halliday as well. And so I decided to bottle it under Our Fathers. And Our Fathers is a not-for-profit business that I run, which I set up in 2014. And so it's been bottled under Our Fathers Smart Vineyard Grenache 24.
And that's still available?
That is still available.
Great.
There's plenty of stock
Awesome.
of that on the Thistledown website.
So tell me about your wine journey. How did you get into wine in the first place?
I loved food and wine. I was a slightly precocious teenager who actually liked cooking dinner parties and things at home. So there was always wine around. My mum and dad had a bit of interest in wine. My mum had actually worked as PA for Ronald Avery, who was one of the pioneers of bringing Australian wine into the UK.
Yeah.
So she always sort of assumed that she'd played quite a large role in my wine career. But it really grew at uni. We used to run a lot of kind of events and do wine matching with those. I did a history degree. There's a lot of historians in the wine trade. And I was told that in third year when I went to a careers advisor that I think something like 40% of historians became accountants. And I thought, no, that's not for me. I don't think accountancy wants me, and I didn't want it. So I thought, well, what am I good at? I'm really good at eating and drinking a lot, so I'll do that. I applied for anything related to food and wine and started working for Majestic Wine around London.
Yep.
Straight out of university. Spent 3 years. Yeah, and I started the diploma, the WSET diploma during that time. Then I moved back to Edinburgh, where I'd grown up, and worked for what was at the time a little company called Alliance Wine, which is now one of the biggest importers and distributors in the UK. And during that time, I did the MW, and I'd started off in a kind of sales-based role, moved on to head up all of the buying, marketing, and then latterly ran all of the production projects for the business.
Yep.
So that's 30 years.
And you said you did the Master of Wine. How was that process? And is it as hard as everyone says?
No, it was easy. It's a piece of cake. Yeah, it's pretty tough. I was very fortunate to get through it quite quickly.
Yeah.
I'm one of these people that kind of, if I'm doing something, I go for it pretty hard and pretty determined. So I managed to get through it reasonably quickly, not without its sacrifices, it should be said. But no, it is tough. If you've done a university degree, you kind of know that if you work hard, you'll get a reasonable pass. If you don't work hard, you'll probably pass, but it won't be a very good degree. The MW is completely different because the pass rate is so low. And the skill sets needed for the theory and the practical are so different from one another that there's no guarantee that however talented you are, you'll actually come out with anything. Mm-hmm. And that, I think that's very tough on the person that's doing it, but it's also very tough on everybody around you who makes sacrifices when you're studying every night, when you're studying at weekends, when you're going away to do vintage. And there's no guarantee that you'll get anything out the other side.
It's sort of self-guided, isn't it, too? They're sort of like, this is what you need to do by here, and then off you go.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you are assigned a mentor, but the relationship with the mentor is very much guided by this person studying.
Yeah.
So whether you have much contact or lots of contact is very much down to an individual relationship. There are study days and there's residential courses, but an awful lot of it is self-guided. And when I was doing it, which was 98 to 2001, which is when I passed, the internet barely existed. It's just sad to say. So everything was kind of booked.
Maybe that was a good thing.
well, I think in some ways it was, because it was very easy, even back then, was you could go down a rabbit hole for days if you got into too much depth on one subject, because the MW covers so much breadth that you could go down a rabbit hole and suddenly your whole study plan is thrown off. Now, when you've got the internet in front of you, you can be going off doing all sorts of things you shouldn't be doing.
And where did you learn to make wine?
Well, if you talk to people in the winery, they'd say he's still learning.
I don't know about that. Wine of the year.
When I was studying for the MW, well, I guess stepping back from that, I was doing quite a lot of the buying for the business. So I was in front of wineries and winemakers all of the time. And because of the nature of how we develop products, a lot of the time it was giving guidance in terms of wine styles and what might impact wine styles. So there was quite a lot of technical input from that side. And then as I was studying for the MW, I spent 2 vintages over in Napa, working with a winery there and studying for the dissertation that I was required to do at the end of the MW. So I had a good experience over there. And then gradually, it's just been through trial and error. We set up the Australian business in 2006, but Thistledown itself was founded in 2010. So it's just been through trial and error.
Yeah.
I love cooking. I think I'm a reasonable cook. I've not been trained to do that, but I think there's a lot of similarities in the skills that are required to make this kind of wine. Mm-hmm. And in terms of being a good cook, essentially it's about good ingredients, but it's having an intuitive palate that you can look at ingredients and kind of know where you want it to head. And I think I'm lucky that I can wander into a vineyard. And there are other things at play. I'm thinking, well, this vineyard looks beautiful. It's got a great story. I can market this. But it's also tasting the fruit and thinking, well, does that fit with the profile of Thistledown? And where can I take that it's going to do something different to everything else that we've already got? And I can generally taste the fruit and know exactly where that wine is going to sit.
Yeah.
A lot of what we do is really just using intuition. We're not using a huge amount of highly technical pieces of equipment or very analytical winemaking. It's not natural, but it's more about feeling and emotion and letting the fruit do the talking as much as possible. Yeah, I think that the most important thing that I've learned is that the more time I spend in the vineyards, the better the wines get, understanding those vineyards and doing as little as possible once the wines get into the winery.
So tell me about Thistledown. What made you set up a winery in Australia when you live in Scotland?
Yeah, it does seem a fairly nuts thing to do. I'd always done a lot with Australian wine. So in my past life, working for Alliance back in the UK, I'd focus very heavily on Australia and Spain as the two kind of regions or countries that Alliance would become known for. This was quite a long period of time ago. And I was lucky enough when I was doing the WSET diploma that I won the Spanish and the Australian scholarship. So I was given the opportunity to travel quite widely as a result of that. And so I spent a lot of time working with Australian wineries, representing them in the UK market. And as a result of that, spent a lot of time over here as well and began to see the potential and also the challenges ahead. But we were also sort of drawn to trying to overcome this perception that Australian wine, whilst it's hugely successful in the UK market, and it was in the US market, in retail sectors, it's never been particularly important in kind of the on-trade premium fine dining sector. It's always been a very, very small part of it. And that's ostensibly because Australian wine was seen as too big, too powerful, too overwhelming. And why, if you're a Michelin-starred chef and you've gone to the effort of finding all these incredible ingredients, would you want your wine to be overwhelmed? Your food to be overwhelmed? But we knew that didn't have to be the case. That was, I think, very much a stylistic choice that was being made at the time, driven by fashion. So we established Thistledown really with the idea of creating more medium-bodied, food-friendly styles, more reflective of their place, less forced. And it just so happened that when we started looking at that, it was also at the point in time when absolutely nobody wanted Grenache. And so there was an opportunity to try and help save Grenache, which previously had been kind of pushed into this Shiraz kind of shape.
Yeah.
Trying to pick it late, extract it heavily, put in lots of oak. And we thought, well, there's a way of trying to save Grenache by turning it into something people actually want to drink. And we'll also do what we set out to do, which is create more pretty, aromatic, food-friendly styles of wine. And so kind of Thistledown evolved from there. So we set up in 2010. The first few years were relatively kind of slow, stuttering footsteps, not helped by the fact we started in 2011, which is one of the wettest vintages in history. But really from kind of 14, 15 onwards, got motoring and has grown arms and legs since then. And we've been very lucky we got in at a time when we could get access to all of these vineyards that now everybody would be very willing to pay lots of money to get into.
There wasn't really, as you said, anyone making this kind of lighter style of Grenache when you founded Thistledown. Did you ever have any doubts about how it would be received?
I don't think it's necessarily true that there wasn't anyone making them. I when I started, I wasn't conscious of anybody else making them. I think in hindsight, talking to Steve Pannell, Pete Fraser, David Gleave at Wollonga, a lot of people were beginning.
Okay.
They'd either started or they were beginning to. And ironically, I think the 2011 vintage for a lot of people where they had to pick early because the fruit was rotting, was a bit of an eye-opener that actually you could produce these slightly lighter styles, and a few years on they looked pretty good. I mean, I've had doubts about how these wines are perceived. We've done some quite kind of contemporary styles of Australian Grenache for a mass consumer base. And it's quite interesting looking at the reaction to that. It's black or white.
Yeah.
They either completely get it and they love it, or they think it's the worst wine that they've ever come across. because so many consumers around the world still believe that colour and extract are what defines quality. And then they see these wines that are pale and aromatic and think, no. So we've still got a bit of work to do. And even last year, a very senior winemaker in Australia came over to me at a tasting in the UK and he said, so when's Grenache going to happen? And I kind of jokingly said to him, oh, is it not happening for you already? But there are doubts. We still have a way to go in convincing the consumer that it's a relevant wine style. Fortunately for wines like this, there isn't enough to go around in the first place. So we don't have to do too hard a job on that. But if we really want to create a sustainable future for Grenache in Australia, and it is one of the most suited varieties to a changing climate, so it is important that we do it. We need to make sure that the wider consumer base understands what it is we're trying to do with it.
What variety do you love making after Grenache? Because Grenache isn't all you make, even though it's your specialty. Do you have a second favourite?
Grenache Blanc.
Does it behave in a similar way?
Yeah, it does, actually. It's Grenache Blanc is a much more recent arrival.
Yep.
I don't know whether there was any Grenache Blanc when cuttings first came over and it just kind of disappeared out, but it's much more recent, and it's only in the last few years there's been enough of it to commercialize properly. So far, it promises to do really, really good things. It throws a massive crop first few vintages. So you have to manage it very carefully. But Grenache does that when it's young as well. But in terms of its ability to cope with water stress, it behaves exactly like its red sibling. It has stomata on the leaves that can close up, which stops respiration. So it's much more drought tolerant than other varieties. It's relatively kind of neutral, so it's a bit of a blank canvas in terms of what you want to do with it, whether you want to
similar to Chardonnay, like it's...
Yeah. So, I mean, you can produce something which is very crisp and kind of green appley, or you can produce something like they do in Catalonia and northeast Spain, which is much more rich and textural and waxy. So Grenache Blanc is great. I love Roussanne as well, and we make a Roussanne Grenache Blanc blend.
All the own varieties.
Yeah, I don't have access to all of them, but I love that kind of textural style of wine.
Yeah.
Still like making Shiraz,
Yep.
but we tend to not push it as hard as would have been in the past, making it more in the kind of Thistledown style, which is more about balance and elegance and energy. But yeah, I love having a go at anything, really.
I'm just going to finish with some quick-fire questions. So if you weren't a winemaker, what would you be?
Well, probably what I was before, which was in sales, marketing, buying, but still within wine or food. I'm a frustrated chef, restaurateur. So, yeah, one of those.
What are you drinking at the moment?
Well, I've just flown over from the UK and from Edinburgh during the festival Fringe, and bizarrely enough, summer has coincided with some quite nice weather. So I've mainly been drinking beer for the last few weeks out at various venues. If I'm not drinking beer, then I've got hugely Catholic tastes. It's whatever's put in front of me. I love Riesling, whether it's Moselle or whether it's Clare or Eden. I love rosé. One of my favourite wines when I first got into the wine trade was old school, traditional Rioja Rosado, which that particular one doesn't exist any longer, but I love those more kind of savoury styles of rosé.
Yep.
Not necessarily the kind of slightly watery Provence styles, but something with a little bit more body. Pretty Catholic when it comes to that.
When you're in Australia, do you have a favourite bar that you go to regularly in McLaren Vale or Adelaide?
I'm generally kind of Adelaide CBD based.
Yep.
So it tends to be kind of Mother Vine, East End Cellars, or somewhere on Lee Street, Peel Street, so somewhere like Jenny's, that kind of stuff. Anywhere with really eclectic stuff, but also a really good, strong base of domestic wines as well. Because when I'm here, I mean, I'm exposed to huge international array of wines, particularly spending so much time in the UK. So here, what I generally want to try is as much Australian wine as possible.
Yeah.
Which can be quite difficult sometimes because there's so much imported wine on so many lists.
Do you have a go-to wine?
No. I mean, the first instance is always, well, what Grenache do I need to have a look at?
Yeah.
There's always somebody new coming up with something. So I'll have a look at that first. I still love Spanish wine, so I will go to Spain for a lot of stuff because there's such great value from there. If I'm looking at whites, Northern Italy, I love really good Soave.
Yeah.
From Piera Pan or Anselmi, somebody like that. There's slightly more kind of textural styles. I love sherry. I could drink sherry all day long. But yeah, pretty eclectic tastes.
What's the rarest or oldest wine you've tried?
A PX from Montilla. I think it was 1824 or something like that. This was probably about 15 years ago. So it was pretty
still in
old.
good condition?
It was drinkable. Yeah, it was. No, I mean, it was incredibly dark, very rich, raisiny, almost kind of tobacco leaf, but still alive. Incredible. Those wines can live for such an incredible length of time. So that's probably the oldest thing I've ever tried.
Do you have a bucket list wine?
I would love to be able to drink Rayas as much as everybody seems to on Instagram. There's all these people with huge, great big verticals of Rayas, and I'm thinking, I can't afford a single bottle of it. So Rayas would be nice in terms of kind of everyday desert island wines, things like Rioja Alta, been at 890, which is Gran Reserva, very traditional style Rioja. Absolutely love that wine.
Yeah.
Great white Burgundy, the usual stuff that everybody kind of hankers for.
Do you have a wine guilty pleasure?
Well, I have a project in New Zealand making Sauvignon Blanc, which is so uncool, probably.
There's some really cool heavy beers coming out of New Zealand.
There's incredible stuff, and I think in some ways there's a real opportunity to get back to what attracted people to Sauvignon Blanc in the past. It's become a bit commoditized, and some of the plantings are in places where they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But the real essence of the best Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc is still a beautiful wine, incredibly intense. So I love that. I love lots of different styles of rosés. I don't feel guilty about any of it.
No,
really.
you shouldn't. Favorite food and wine pairing?
So many. I think one of my happiest memories was wandering into a restaurant in Ribera del Duero. And I didn't know it at the time, but they were having a kind of a fiesta based around milk-fed lamb. So it was a restaurant that only served milk-fed lamb. So every single table had this big earthenware dish. The milk-fed lamb was cooked on hay. And it was just served with really young Ribera del Duero Tempranillo-based wines. And that was just such a beautiful memory. The meat is incredible. Everybody was having fun. There was a band playing who gradually got drunker and drunker throughout the whole of lunch. I mean, they were bad at it's kind of Spanish brass bands are pretty poor at the best of times. But they just got worse and worse throughout the whole of lunch. So yeah, lamb and Rioja is incredible. That's slow cooked where it's falling apart. That would be one of the best memories. Sherry down in the south of Spain with some little tortilla camarón, little shrimps.
And is there a wine region that you haven't been to that you'd like to visit?
I haven't been to Sardinia. Okay. I would love to go to Sardinia because they would argue that's the home of Grenache, Cananao, and there's some really exciting stuff going on there, I believe. So I'd love to go there. I have been to Sicily a couple of times, but not as many as I'd like to. And I love those more kind of ethereal, transparent Norellos that you get from there, and a lot of the stuff that's happening around Etna. I think that would be really good. Probably haven't spent enough time in Portugal either. There's very few places that I haven't spent any time in.
Yeah.
So it's probably more about going back and exploring them in more detail. I used to go to South Africa regularly. I haven't been there for a long time. And
Make a pinotage?
It wouldn't be for pinotage, but obviously the white scene there is incredible, but also what they're doing with Old Vine Grenache is also really interesting as well. So I'd love to spend a bit of time there.
Thank you so much for joining me. Is there anything you wanted to plug before we finish? Are you working on anything special or?
Always working on special things. I've mentioned rosé a few times. I'm working on a bit of a special new rosé project, but I can't really plug it at the moment because it's not finished.
Just watch this space.
Definitely watch this space and look out for Our Father's wine as well, which is not a million miles away from the wine that's won the award.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Giles.
Not at all. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the Halliday Wine Companion Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe so you never miss one. Love it? Leave a review and share it with friends. For more, visit winecompanion.com.au or follow us on Instagram @winecompanion.